rule.
Great. So tell me about the history of the fair. I know it's not completely historically accurate, but you do have some SCA people here. You have Henry Hall, and your crafts and foods are kind of, well, food anyway, is kind of Renaissance-y, but the crafts are. So tell me about how history plays a role in creating a Renaissance fair.
Well, I'm not the best person to talk about history because I actually have a degree in German and business, and I spent some time in Europe as a student, as did two of my brothers, and that's why we enjoy working on this. We get to apply some of the things we experienced growing up to this. But as far as the history of the show, the history is kind of what people make it, because history is open to interpretation, and I try not to get involved in a lot of debates people have that this would have or would not have been here and there, and what the real situation would have been in the politics of the period, because we have enough of that in real life. But I think what it does avail people is the opportunity to get as immersed and recreate as much of it as they want to. Some of the vendors here who live here, particularly on Friday and Saturday and even Sunday night, try and live as close to the period as they can. Not many of them cook over an open fire anymore, since I don't allow them, but and a lot of them find going to a local restaurant a lot more enjoyable than staying here all day in tights and doublet. They, a number of them though do come and ask us to turn off lights and things because they are camping out in their Renaissance period building and living similar to that, except they all get up in the morning and go to breakfast at the waffle booth. So we do try and replicate areas with Hengrave Hall, with some of the people who do some of the fine up-close things, the wood carving, the tatting, the crochet type things, to visit with the people about how a kitchen would have operated then, or mannerisms. And those are all elements that people are interested in. Part of the show is educational. It's not the first thing that comes to mind, and we'd like to expand on it more. It's not the easiest thing to sell, so the easier things are a joust, or a magic show, or a juggler, or comedy, or even play or singing. But there are things like the Crown Jewel exhibition, where if you really take your time and go through it and read all the literature, half of the pieces in there were generated for the coronation rehearsals in the early 50s for Elizabeth II. And they are true to the period that each of those crowns was created. If you sit at the joust field and watch the archery exhibition, you'll learn a lot of history of archery. And it's, to me, a fascinating thing. I had always walked by it and sat down one day when it wasn't particularly busy for me, and there weren't a lot of people there. The benches hold over 3,000 people, and there were probably around 300 people watching it. And they were all enthralled, and I sat and watched the entire rest of the show to see how good those archers were, but to learn more about archery. So as far as the historical aspect of the festival, again, we are using history as a springboard, and that doesn't mean other people can't be more historical than we are at it and have a more authentic experience because of what they pick and choose at the festival. But for us, it's, I don't want to say background, but it's the water that we're all immersed in, except some of us are swimming in different directions.
That's important. Talk to me about, earlier you mentioned the frivolity and romanticism of the Henry time period. Now you also have themes that happen every weekend of the fair? Why do you choose to do themes?
To make everybody, in answer to your question about why we promote the festival with some different themes and events during the course of a 9-week season, is the number one question when people call and ask us after how they get here and how much it costs is what's new. And from year to year they want to know that, and some of it's just being conversational, not because people always want new things. They never want us to give up anything. If we ever have a performer not return, the amount of letters and phone calls we get about that is tremendous. They just want things added to the show. So in order to promote the show with some different interests and to get a little more current and relevance to it each weekend, we came up with some themes. And some other shows that have been doing too, and then we developed some that they've copied. And it's also in response to current events. We were doing a mariners or seafarers theme for a while with sea chanties, and then when the pirate movies came out, those became so big that the focus shifted to a pirate themed weekend. We've always done a Scottish themed or a Celtic themed weekend. We've done from time to time Shakespeare. Some things are because they become available to us. Many years ago, UMBC had a Shakespeare on Wheels theater production group, and so they came to us with wanting to do that here, and that was kind of the springboard of our Shakespeare weekend at that time. And then part of what that plays into is the whole notion that this is a romantic period and you can be somebody that you can't be in your regular life. Even if you come here not in costume, here's a chance to be a little more gregarious, a little more spontaneous than you would be sitting in your cubicle or at your desk or riding the metro. You can cheer at a joust. You can participate in a sing-along in a tavern. Even if you're not in costume, if you choose to get in costume, you can make it any kind of day you want. And here's a chance, and again, partly why we're not as historically accurate as we could be, is we don't want pigs running around the streets and sewage spilled out everywhere and plague running around the village. We'll talk about those things, but really what you have a chance to do here is be somebody you aren't. You can be a little more chivalrous, a little more romantic. You can be a princess, a prince, a swashbuckler, and play to other people doing the same thing. And again, they don't all have to be in costume. You don't all have to be trying to dress and stage the production. It can be just a fleeting conversation or a shouted comment to somebody that you like their costume, and they'll respond something back to you. We always try and educate our trash kids on the festival as much as we can. And Danny, who's been running our trash program for a number of years, has an orientation meeting every morning of the fair. And because the kids who pick up trash have more conversations with customers than anybody else here. And we want them to be able to tell people where to go, what to recommend to them, and how to enhance their experience. So I think we diverge from the being a real historical venue to being a real venue of what the best of history might have been, what you could have been if you could have selected who you wanted to be in history during that period anyway. And you have a chance to act that out a little bit, maybe be a better person than you are the rest of the year, or a little more racy than you might be the rest of the year, a little more carefree than you might be. But here's a chance to come out and enjoy it with us.
Very cool.
I'm going to cut